Welcome to the GLS podcast. I'm Lori Hermann, executive producer of the Summit. This is our bonus show, Faculty Spotlight. In today's episode, I had the opportunity to talk with author, speaker, creativity expert, and leadership consultant Todd Henry. Let's get to know him a little better. So Todd Henry is going to be at GLS 19, and we are thrilled about it. And we are here in Cincinnati, his hometown. And I know, or I've read a little bit, that Cincinnati is the chili capital of the world.
It is in fact true, but when we talk about chili, we talk about maybe chili looks a little different here than it does elsewhere, because when you eat chili here, it usually involves spaghetti, it involves cheese, it involves like sometimes hot dogs, which is a little odd, but you know, so it's kind of like a whole thing here. Yeah.
So Cincinnati has taken chili to a whole new creative level, it sounds
absolutely, no question. Yeah.
Well, and that's probably why you're here, right? Because you're about creativity, and and that's how you landed in Cincinnati.
Something like that, yeah.
Well, tell us a little bit about what you do if you're not eating chili.
Yeah, so I write books, and then I get to travel all over the world helping teams be what I call prolific, brilliant, and healthy all at the same time.
That's a big task. It sounds like those are big things.
It really is, but listen, we have to go to work, we have to solve problems every day. We have to do that under pressure. And I don't know about the Global Leadership Network, but most organizations I encounter, they're not saying, hey, budgets are going up, timelines are extended, as many resources as you want, just do whatever you got to do.
Constraints.
Right, we have constraints. There's a lot of pressure. And so what I do is I teach organizations how to create systems and practices to help them be productive and prolific under that pressure in the midst of what I call the create on demand world, which is we have to go to work, we have to solve problems every day under pressure. So if you can't do that over the long term, if you don't have some rituals, practices in your life and in your organization to help you do it.
So true. How did you come to this point where you have some of those rituals and practices that you can come alongside people and help them develop?
So I think like most wisdom in life, it comes from painful experience, right? It's you have a need and you have to figure out how to solve it. And so I've been really fortunate to be a part of organizations that gave me flexibility to explore what would it look like if we were to define focus differently? What would it look like if we built some relationships that helped us connect and stay inspired and ask dangerous questions and those kinds of things? And so over time, I just was really fortunate to be able to discover what the best people and teams were doing to help them be prolific, brilliant, and healthy, and to codify that. And that was really about the center of my work as I wrote my first book, The Accidental Creative, which came out in 2011. And then from there, I really have just kind of pivoted that to what does that look like from a team perspective? So I know what individuals need to do, but what really do leaders need to do in order to position their team to be able to produce the value they're capable of producing every day?
That is, I would imagine, been an amazing journey. You've led creative teams,
correct,
right?
Yes.
So that's a lot of how you came to that accidental creative.
That's the painful experience part. Yeah, right, exactly, yeah.
So I know from working with creatives too, that you can have some pretty crazy stories about things, creative ideas you had that went great and creative ideas that bombed. Any fun stories you can share with us? Yeah,
so we produced a show one time that was has sort of become the whipping boy of lore, right? For this, but it was our first attempt to try to create something that would be really big and really imaginative, and something that was a little bit out of the box for us, and unfortunately, didn't quite have the effect that we wanted to have. But the great thing about that is it led the following year to something that we probably wouldn't have arrived at had we not first taken that bold risk. And I think that's often what we fail to realize as organizations, is that it's often not the first bold risk that you take that leads to success. It's the first bold risk that tills the soil that allows you then to plant the seeds that create the harvest later. And so one of the things we have to do as leaders is frame up what success really looks like. And sometimes success looks like, hey, this failed by all the metrics we went into it with, but success for us now can look like, what have we learned from this? What are we going to do differently next time? How can we parlay this into something that can actually create the kind of value we intended to create with this? A failure is truly only a failure if we don't learn from it, if we're not able to adapt and apply those principles moving forward.
Exactly, and not let any failure scare you from taking future risks.
That's absolutely right. And that's the thing. I think we sometimes we artificially escalate the perceived consequences of failure in our work. We tell ourselves stories and narratives about what's going to happen if it fails, what's going to happen if this doesn't, hit our objectives. And the reality is that often those are artificially escalated perceived consequences. We go through our days artificially escalating these things. And so we stay in a corner. We don't take little strategic risks. And by the way, we think about risk as this big thing. Risk is maybe having a conversation with a team member. Risk might be introducing an idea in a meeting. It's a little risk, but that little risk then creates a reservoir of courage to be able to take more strategic risks down the road.
Any tips for us on how to avoid being paralyzed by that fear and not stepping out?
I think community is really important. Yeah. So we need to have other people around us to help us understand the true nature of the risk, not the perceived nature of the risk. So we need to make sure that we're connecting with people who can help us understand when we're artificially escalating the perceived consequences, and also who can speak courage into us and say, hey, you've got this. I know you don't think you do because there's this narrative in your brain telling you that, well, what if you fail? What will they say? But if we have other people around us, and this is especially true in a team context, one of the things I work through with teams of creative people is when you're about to do something risky, the very first question you should ask when you make a decision is, what are we afraid might happen?
That's great.
If we do this,
what
right?
What are we afraid might happen?
Yes, if we do this. First question you ask. So that way people can start talking about it. And you can say, actually that is a valid concern and that's okay. Yeah. But also, on the other side of it, you might say, well, so what? So what if that happens?
What is the worst thing?
Right, you can talk about that in the context. That's right, talk about it in the context of community.
Totally, that's a great tip. Community is such a value. Yeah. And I can see already you're such a huge encourager. So I can just imagine what it was like to be on your team. When was the first time you knew you were a leader?
First of all, I think that's a difficult thing to define, right? Because I think anybody who has influence, anybody who creates value, anybody who in any capacity has sway over others is in a leadership role. Yeah. I think the first time it occurred to me was probably, frankly, when I was thrust into a position where I had to figure it out. And I think that's the way it is for many leaders. I don't think they aspire necessarily to jump into a leadership role. I think for a lot of people, I've been thrust into this and now I have to figure it out as I go. And I think it's probably the same for me,
Well, clearly you figured a lot out and you're helping people all over the world already. I know your books have been huge inspirations to us and we cannot wait to have you at the summit and learn even more. Weren't you just captivated by Todd's practical leadership insights? Like I said earlier, you don't want to miss him at the summit this year on August 8th and 9th in North America. So go right now for the best rate to globalleadership.org/summit and register for one of over 500 sites in the US and Canada. Until then, keep tuning in to our faculty spotlights where you will get to know Devon Franklin, Danielle Strickland, and our new summit champion, Craig Groeschel. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you at the summit.